One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. It is your host, Sam Jacobs. We are excited for this week. This is the last couple episodes. This is the last episode of 2019. Tonight, if my math is correct, is New Year's Eve. So I hope you're doing something fun and safe. Today on the show, we've got Justin Welsh. Justin helped build the sales team at ZocDoc. He then went on to help build Patient Pop to over $60 million in recurring revenue. And now he's consulting to SMB businesses, small and medium-sized business. At SaaS companies selling to small and medium-sized businesses, and he's got a lot of great insights. And he's also doing a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn, so you can follow him on LinkedIn. The conversation's fantastic. It's all about how to build a great culture, how to think about incentivizing a team, how to help pull out a quarter if you're going to miss the number, and some creative things you can do to get there. So it's a really, really good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Now, before we get there, of course, we want to thank our sponsors. We've got two sponsors. The first is DocuSign. Every sales org feels the pressure to close deals faster. Take control with the DocuSign Agreement Cloud, a suite of tools that automate sales contracts and quotes all in your CRM. Create custom contracts, get them signed, and pull data back into your opportunities. See why more than 500,000 businesses use DocuSign with a free trial and discount exclusively for Sales Hacker listeners at go.docusign.com/saleshacker. If you're out there listening and you want to support the Sales Hacker podcast and you like the content that you're listening, then consider selling your email address to DocuSign by going to go.docusign.com/saleshacker, and that will help us stay on the air. We appreciate it. And of course, you do need to sign contracts electronically, so you're going to need that DocuSign Agreement Cloud. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale, from automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best. Outreach has your back. So without further ado, let's listen to this conversation with Justin Welsh. Hey everyone, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We are incredibly excited today to have a friend and a luminary, a rising star among thought leadership in the world of high-growth companies. It's Justin Welsh. He's the former SVP of sales at Patient Pop and a current advisor to a tremendous number of SMB SaaS companies. When he left Patient Pop, he'd helped grow it to over $60 million in recurring revenue. They'd raised over $75 million in funding, and he's putting out a lot of amazing content on LinkedIn, including is it a Sunday newsletter, Justin?
Yeah, it's a Sunday newsletter every Sunday morning around 8:30 Pacific time. And then usually you'll see my face pop up in your LinkedIn feed each morning around 6 a.m.
I love your face. Does the newsletter have a name?
Yeah, it's called the Weekly Content Rundown. And the real goal was just to aggregate as much valuable content that I can find on LinkedIn each week and release it to the community on LinkedIn, so they don't really have to search for all the good content. It's just right there in my newsletter.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for providing that service. And then second of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here. Been excited.
We're excited to have you. So I just gave a little bit about your background, but we'd like to know, how did you get here? Who is the man inside of the persona? Who is the man behind the man? Who is the inner Mick Jagger? We see the public-facing Mick Jagger, that is Justin Welsh, but who are you inside? So give us a little bit about your origin story. How'd you get here? Tell us a little bit about your career and what you're up to now.
Yeah, I think, I have a maybe not extremely unique story, but potentially different than some of the other folks that you've interviewed, where I came out of school in 2003 and really for the first 6 years of my career, I was pretty much what you would label a complete failure. I worked at 3 different companies in the pharmaceutical and medical device space. I got fired from all 3 of those companies, and across 6 years, I never achieved a quota a single time. So By the time I was, 28 years old, I had never been successful, and I had never even really tasted success. And, the way that I tell it in the reality of how it happened is I got reached out to by a company called ZocDoc in New York City. And they're well known now, last valuation around $2 billion, real big company. But back then, just 9 people in a 1,000 square foot office in Chinatown. And they were, selling me on coming to New York City and becoming one of their first salespeople. And I did. I took a bus from Allentown, PA to New York and moved and made very little money. But for some reason, when I joined ZocDoc, it was sort of like how I described this really perfect intersection, like super smart people, a a product I absolutely loved and could stand behind. And then this environment of like New York City, the energy, the hustle. I think all those things sort of combined with my own sort of perfectly timed maturity, where I was finally like becoming a mature person, and went out my first day, made a sale, and over the next 5 years, ZocDoc moved me across the country 4 times. I managed local teams, I managed regional teams, and then in January of 2015, I got hired on as the VP of Sales at Patient Pop, and spent the last 5 years building it into this $60 million recurring revenue machine, and that's where I'm at today.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. Let's double click on that failure part. So first of all, where'd you go to school? Like what happened? What was that origin story of coming out of school? Are you from Allentown?
No, I went to the Ohio State University.
I didn't know you went to Ohio State. That is so upsetting.
I know. I try and keep it quiet from you, especially, but yeah, it's great.
Well, that's why you were a failure. That is why you were a failure.
Yeah, exactly. No, I came out of there in 2003, man, and like, to be very honest, I was just immature. Like, I didn't go to class very much. I think my freshman year, I got a 1.9. I ended up graduating, business school with a really good GPA, and I kind of buckled down my senior year. But I wanted to party and have fun and work out and do a bunch of stuff that 21-year-olds want to do. And I did it in every small town you could possibly think of in America. I moved from, Toledo, Ohio, Allentown, PA, St. Clair Shores, Michigan. And like, I just couldn't latch on because I wasn't ready. And, when I think back, it's like, I was never passionate about what I was doing. Like, if I worked extra hard, I made a few, additional pennies for the CEO who, I'd never met, seen, or heard from. So just didn't get me jazzed.
What was the spark? I think a lot of people probably feel that way, that they don't have the passion. And I think a lot of people don't know, it's a weird word, like it's still work. So, saying that you're supposed to be passionate about it is sometimes confusing for a lot of people. If you had to define what it was that clicked when you joined ZocDoc, what was it, A, about the opportunity? And then maybe B, what was it about you personally that had shifted that you could sort of find your calling?
Yeah, I think it's when I first went for the interview in 2009. I sat down with Cyrus, Oliver, Nick, Netta, and Ryan, who were the sort of the 4 executives, and then the guy who was really the director of sales at that time. And I had never been so impressed by people's intelligence. And it just blew my mind. These folks were like so much smarter than I was. And I think that really motivated me. And when you combined it with the energy of New York, suddenly I'm surrounded by really smart, really hardworking people in an office in the world's most energetic city. And when you sort of couple that with the passion that I had for the product, to give you an example, I took this product home to my mom and my best friends, and I'm like, hey, this is online doctor's appointments. What do you guys think about this? And everyone's like, this is amazing. Like, we need this service. And so I was so proud to represent something that I thought was transformational. And when you coupled that with these really incredibly smart and hardworking people in this really, really just energetic city, I think I finally saw the opportunity to be successful for the first time in my life. Went out day one with Ryan Stam, my boss, and made a sale. And I think that was the switch. I think that was the confidence that I needed. And when I made that sale, like literally, Sam, the rest was history. Like, I tripled down on knowledge and studying and getting great at the product. Like, I worked super hard, like got up at, 6 a.m, got out in the field super early, was back at the office till about 9 p.m. Like, it was almost just like a transformation overnight. And I think it was a combination of those 3 things.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. So what have you learned? You were at ZocDoc for a long time. You've seen ZocDoc is one of those, it's both a cautionary tale from a valuation perspective sometimes, but also a great New York success story. Starting at 10 people, it grew to tons and tons of people. You then went to Patient Pop, which is a fairly similar company, if not a direct competitor. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, they're more of they're complementary, I would say. ZocDoc's a dual-sided marketplace, and Patient Pop is more of a marketing tool for offices. But yeah, if you're competing for budget, sure.
Okay, cool. But 2 different times now, one at ZocDoc and one at Patient Pop, you started at a very, very early stage, and you've helped grow to scale 60 million. ZocDoc's probably well north of 100 million, but either one of those are strong, stout, resolute businesses that when you joined them were not. They were much riskier endeavors. So what are the things that you learned that help take a company from risky and unformed to, to strong and lots of recurring revenue and to, a big business? Like, what are the lessons as a leader that you sort of internalized?
Yeah, a couple different lessons. I think like the first one that stands out to me and that I talk about with anyone who I'm advising or working with is everything breaks all of the time. Like all of the time, every hour, every day, every week, every month, stuff in like really high growth startups are breaking. And when you're building your team, whether it's your leadership team or your sales team or your marketing team, you have to make sure that you're bringing people into your environment that appreciate that and can get through that. And to me, it takes like a really special person to thrive in an environment when things are breaking. And so, we used to go through and not look for necessarily experience or logos or any of that type of stuff when we were interviewing and building our team. We wanted to see people that had just been through shit, for lack of a better term, right? Like they had just been through a ton of shit in their career or their life, and they had come out on the other side as a really positive, curious, executionary type of person. And that's what we built at ZocDoc and Patient Pop. We didn't have big logo folks. We had like really, really hard workers who were executors. And so that was a really big lesson for me. And when I'm looking for people like that, one indicator that someone is like that is they're investing in themselves always. They have a mentor. They're constantly reading. They're constantly educating. They're at the office, consuming knowledge all of the time. And that's the biggest lesson that I've had in building two really big startups is surrounding your companies with people like that.
You mentioned working hard, and there's this controversy right now, or I guess a debate. It's ignited a debate with the founders of Away, and their exhortations to their customer service team about skipping holidays and working really, really hard and sort of getting berated on Slack publicly. And then so lots of VCs, lots of founders, lots of other folks are saying, they read that commentary and they say, that's just what it takes. And maybe Steph Curry and Jen Rubio are being unfairly targeted because they're women. And then other folks say, you know what, you don't have to drive people into the ground to build a big company, that it's really about the product and about the market. And you can have a culture of hard work without making people feel like shit. Where do you come out on that spectrum of what it takes to build a great company?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. When you're forcing people to work hard, in my opinion, you don't have a culture of hard work. When you empower your employees to own the growth of the business at all costs and to invest their time wisely in growing the business, and you make that sort of a fundamental piece of your culture, employees work hard without feeling threatened. They work hard without being commanded. If I go back to either Patient Pop or ZocDoc, there was no belittling or berating. Sure, people lost their cool, and yes, like definitely the founders sometimes are not bright and shiny every day. Like don't get me wrong, but no one was being berated for not working until 10 p.m. But a lot of people stuck around at the office, especially at ZocDoc. As I think back into those early days, like people stuck around because they wanted to get stuff done. And to me, it requires a really special founding team to develop and deliver that type of culture. So I don't like the berating part, especially in the belittling. I think that's the opposite of the way that you encourage people to be accountable and to work hard. To me, that was just a mistake. I think from probably two founders, and by the way, I don't know them personally, but I'm making a guess that like that's a lesson that they'll learn over the course of their career and will likely not do that again.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a great insight, which is that if you can empower people, they might not even feel like it's hard work if they're inspired by the mission, and you're giving them the resources to do what they want to do and to self-actualize, so to speak.
Totally. And I just wanted to add something onto that, which is like this idea that hard work is this burnout. I talk about burnout a lot, Sam, and like people are always like, oh, I worked so hard that I burned out, or we are working so hard and the team is burning out. And like, I think that's a myth that burnout is tethered to hard work. To me, like I can work hard on something I love 24 hours in a row, like no sweat. It's when you lose control that that burnout happens. And when you force someone to stay at an office or to do extra hard work, like they often feel the loss of control, and that's where people burn out. But give them something to work on that they love for a long time, and I think that doesn't happen. So just wanted to add that on as a thought that I have around burnout.
No, I think that there's a lot emerging about work in general. I interviewed Dan Pink, who wrote, he's written a bunch of books, but one of them is, I guess his latest book is called When, the Science of Perfect Timing. And it's really about like how what you do during the day is actually impacted by your biological chemistry, and like you should focus different types of mental energy at different times of day. And that is to say that like I think the concept of like you're supposed to sit down at your desk at 9 and work with a few breaks straight through till 6 and then you leave. I don't know, it feels a little dated to me because I know personally from like 3:30 to 5:30 I am a complete waste of space. Totally. And it's really not usually useful for me to be at work, but I can do a lot of work from 6:30 to 9:30. So I don't know. I just think it's evolving, with remote work and with different types of flexible schedules. People are trying to figure out what is the right combination of work patterns.
Definitely agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So now you're consulting. You're meeting all these other companies. Well, actually, before we get there, I have one very, very specific question because this was a debate at a company I advised. Can doctors be sold on the phone, or do you need to go out into the field, even if it's for small deal sizes?
On the phone.
They can be.
100%. Totally.
What do you think generally?
We had a huge inside sales team. Yeah.
Cool. I love that that's resolved. What do you think generally when people say, my buyer is so different than all of your other, experiences, and this is how my buyer buys? What's your insight there?
I mean, certain people are really competent in their specific industry. And if they can objectively say that they've been at 2 or 3 different companies that have the exact same buyer, and they can prove without, any shred of a doubt that their buyer buys in a particular way, I mean, who am I to tell them that they're wrong? But I think what I would do if I was going into a company that didn't have a physician buyer, which is what I'm used to, like I would want to push the boundaries of how people think around their customers purchasing, because I've worked with companies, every day that are selling $6,000 software on the phone, but I'm also working with companies that are selling $200,000 pieces of software over the phone. So I think that, you have to be careful to really box in the way that you sort of, identify your customer buying process and, push it to something more efficient if you can. So I would just question that. But again, if you have the competency in that specific industry and you can prove it, like, who am I to say otherwise?
Fair enough. Related to that. So now you're talking, and this is the beauty of consulting, which is that you get to see so many different business models. You experience so many different founders and companies and go-to-market motions. Just curious, pretty open-ended question, but what are some of the key learnings that you've had as you've developed your consulting business? And what are the big kind of mistakes that you see companies make time and time again when it comes to trying to build or scale their revenue?
Yeah, I think the first and the number one mistake that I see people make is when they go to start building their sales team, the first few hires they make, they are not 100% sold that this person is a top 5 to 10% performer. And when you start building your sales team, the very first sales hires are so crucial. I think back to ZocDoc, it was Ryan Stam, myself, and Javier Rosas. All 3 of us are all doing really great things. If I think back to Patient Pop, it was Max Kim Brown, who is now running the entire field program. Like, you have to nail your first sales hire, and you really should get it through your network. Like, someone should be handing you a salesperson and saying, this guy or gal is incredible and will be an insanely top performer for your business, versus like hiring, someone who's aggressively seeking a job. So number one is like just hiring the wrong salespeople to begin. And then number 2 is following advice that they believe will always be true, even though it doesn't apply to their current situation. So let me give you an example of that. Aaron Ross is obviously very famous for predictable revenue, and I think he's one of the best thinkers in sales. With that being said, sales specialization is not always right for your business. So, I walk into an early stage company, they're selling a $2,000, ACV product. And I say, hey, how are we going to market with this? Tell me about it. Well, we've got, marketing, we've got outbound SDRs, we've got people waiting on demonstrations. And it's like, hey, whoa. This thing's $2,000. Like, let's reevaluate how you're going to go to market with the folks that you have. And so I see so many people just following advice without thinking, is this advice actually applicable to my business? So those are two things that I see as I'm working with companies that stand out to me.
Obviously, the math on a big, intricate sales specialized motion with SDRs, inbound, outbound, and AEs on a $2,000 sale, that math probably just doesn't work, particularly because at a $2,000 sale, there's going to be fairly high churn, maybe.
Yep.
But are you opposed to the general idea? I mean, and to be clear, there are people out there that are saying we've taken the SDR thing way too far, and we just need full cycle reps that can prospect and run demos and close the business all as one person, even for like a $20 or $30 or $50,000 sale. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm generally someone who doesn't make declarative statements. So I'll never say I think, this type of system or process is right. I think it depends on your situation. So the way that I think about specialization in particular is aligning it with how your prospects buy. So if it makes sense for your prospects to go down a certain level with an SDR, getting educated, doing discovery, like really highly qualifying it before turning it over to a highly technical specialized salesperson, there are plenty of companies where specialization is excellent in the right move. But there are some where it's like, hey, I happen to get access to my decision maker. We sell a relatively affordable product. I know from talking to them for 10 minutes that it would help solve, 3 of their biggest challenges, and I have access to them right now. Let's just do the demo and let's get this person to buy our product. So there are oftentimes to me where it's just over specialized, where you literally have a buyer sitting right in front of you who wants to buy your product. And it's like, sorry, that's not what I do. I ask you a lot of questions and then I schedule time 48 hours from now where you may not be interested or you're not at your highest level of engagement. To me, that's just a wasted opportunity.
I love that you said your highest level of engagement. That's really interesting. And basically your point is just when people are ready to buy, don't make it harder for them to do that.
Yeah, Sam, if I'm buying a $50 a month or $100 or $200 a month product and I'm talking and I'm saying, hey, I have a problem and I need to get it solved right now. Don't make me wait 48 hours. Don't schedule me to talk to somebody different. Just tell me how it solves my problem and then sell it to me. I have my credit card here. That's just how I think about it.
I like the way you think about it. Would you like to give me your credit card number?
I would not.
Fair enough. It's worth a shot. You've talked about how data is not always the answer, and that people over-rely potentially on data. Walk us through your thinking there and help inform some of the folks out there that are listening that are getting spreadsheets from their managers or their CEOs with defined and specific conclusions that maybe have more nuance to them than are being presented.
Yeah, I think that, listen, first of all, I love data, and the fact that I can get my hands on as much data as I could at Patient Pop was super helpful to me growing the business. But while I think it's extraordinarily important, it can be misinterpreted. It can also be misconstrued in a lot of different ways. And that's because often you're depending on data that just isn't that good to begin with. It's, you're reliant on your sales team entering things in Salesforce. You're relying on making sure that you're actually looking at the data and interpreting the right way. So I always try to use both quantitative and qualitative analysis when I was a VP of sales. And so, if you talk to people who have worked for me in either business, ZocDoc or Patient Pop, I am not a spreadsheet jockey. I don't sit in my office and analyze data all day. I sit in my office and I look for patterns. I look for roadblocks. I look for things that I can isolate and say, we definitely have a problem. But then I'm out on the floor. I'm talking to my salespeople. I'm talking to my leaders. I'm talking to marketing because I want to hear the anecdotal feedback as well. And to me, one mistake that I see sales leaders making is not getting a well-rounded picture of both the data analysis and the anecdotal feedback from their team in order to come to a good conclusion. So I always just emphasize with my customers today, don't just sit in a room and scan your data. Get out and talk to your team because there's a lot more to uncover that you don't get if you just lock yourself in a room.
I love that. Question about scaling. You join ZocDoc, 10 people. Ultimately, it grows. Ultimately, you go from being an individual contributor to a manager, but not just that, to a manager of managers.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a VP of sales, you kind of have two constituents, or you have many constituents. But first, you have to manage downwards, and then second, you have to manage upwards. And I think managing upwards comes naturally to some folks, but not to everybody. What are the key lessons and what are the key skills that you needed to develop as a leader to help these organizations grow and to be responsible for a team of 50, 60, 70, 100 people? And how do you think about the difference between managing upward and telling a story to the CEO and the board that is compelling and meaningful and resonant at the same time that you're also getting your hands dirty with your managers and helping grow the team?
Yeah, I think managing downwards is, in my book, and this is just kind of my personal opinion, is really about two things. It's about consistent communication. So making sure that you're talking to your managers, your directors, your other VPs, if you're managing other VPs, on a very regular basis. And when I've worked for folks that were VPs of sales, when I was an individual contributor or manager or director, like one thing happened all the time, which was those one-on-ones got canceled, things got moved, and suddenly it's been 30, 40, 50 days and you haven't talked to your VP of sales. To me, that was always problematic. So I think I really focused on making sure that I was consistent with my communication. And then the second thing that I focus on when I'm sort of managing downwards is, how can I be the roadblock remover for my team? So what I've begun to recognize is that when you're talking to managers or directors, they don't have as much experience working cross-functionally as you might as a VP. And so there are things that keep them from succeeding, and often it's in the form of a roadblock from product or marketing or CS, and they don't have the expertise or sort of the experience in going and talking to the person and removing that roadblock. So outside of consistency, the second thing that I focus on is, how can I remove roadblocks from my team so that they can go and do the jobs that I've hired them to do? So those are sort of like the two key points that I look at when managing downwards. On the flip side, going upwards, to me, it's about proactive expectation. So Luke, my former boss and the CEO of Patient Pop, basically had sort of a mantra where it's like, don't surprise me. Right? Like, don't walk into my office and tell me something that is surprising, that's going to catch me off guard. Like, open up a line of communication and proactively let me know what's going well and going poorly all the time. And if something's going poorly, I want you to have a gap plan. I want you to have a plan B. I want to understand how you're going to de-risk this. So for me, it was constantly being very proactive and looking, 90 and 180 days out and informing, my boss, Luke, in this example, of what was going well and poorly, so that we never walked into a one-on-one or a board meeting and he was hearing something for the first time. So those are sort of like things that were helpful for me.
Let's say you're heading into a super important, I'll give you a slightly anonymized but real life example. You're heading into, the company's burning lots of money. You're heading into a super important Q4, and you sort of like maybe a 60 to 90 day sales cycle. So it's like kind of, it's August-ish, and you're looking at your Q4 pipeline and you feel reasonably good about it. And then you come back after Labor Day and a lot of your kind of 50-50 deals have kind of evaporated. What if there is no gap plan? Like what if you just only have bad news and you're not sure? How do you handle that when it's like there might not be anything to do, or is there always something to do in your opinion?
So I have the benefit, I guess you could call it, of working my entire career in, SMB SaaS, right? So my sales cycles, Sam, are closer to 2 weeks than they are, 60 or 90 days. So in my examples, I always felt like there was a way to win, right? And I think that's what sort of separated maybe Patient Pop's sales leadership team, is we always felt like there was a way to win. So what we would often do, if we had a plan A and plan A was failing and plan B was also failing, like, you better believe that I was getting Kevin, Max, Robert, myself in our team into a room, and it was plan C time. Like, what's the gap plan that we're going to execute on over the next 90 days? And let's get wildly creative. We were always looking at opportunities to do that because we were in a shorter sales cycle business. If I was in a longer sales cycle business, and there was nothing thing to do, and that was just all there was to it. I think what I would do is just be honest and be very thorough about what am I going to do next time this scenario happens, and what am I going to prepare to make sure that we don't find ourselves in this scenario next year. And there are definitely times where I missed my quarterly number, not often, but there were times. And when I walked into the board meeting, like all my focus was on letting them know how I was going to avoid this happening ever again. And so it's sort of a similar thought as walking into a board meeting where you've just had a bad quarter. So that's sort of how I think about it from the businesses I've been a part of.
I love it. It's great advice. So you mentioned getting wildly creative. What are some of the most creative things you did over the last, 10 years to close a gap between the number that you needed to hit and what the pipeline would indicate?
Oh, brother. Oh, giving away my secret sauce. I've done some things. We've done some things that like I don't want the audience to take away as always good recommendations, but I can recall like times where it's like, hey, we have some partners, like we had some pretty big partners at Patient Pop, and it's like, let's fire up a big time spiff for these partners, and let's go out and let's just sort of eat a spiff on the front end, because we know we have really good LTV on our customers. So like, we'll just eat this one time spiff. We would go out, to our sales team and say like, hey, each of you find 3 deals in your pipeline, right? I had 140 reps. That's 500 or 420 deals, right? Like you get 3 opportunities where we'll, eliminate the implementation fee, which is oftentimes the non-starter for our customers, or, give them an extra discount. And like, people hate that kind of stuff, like other sales leaders. But from an SMB SaaS perspective, when you hold on to your customers for a long time, like we were willing to roll the dice on those things in order to hit our bookings targets. And it to be honest, like we didn't have a high churn business at Patient Pop. So for us, it was okay. But those are some of the creative things that we've done over the course of time.
I love it. And the whole deal is, what are your unit economics, and do people actually stick around? And
That's
if
right.
they don't, then you probably don't have a company anyway, but you certainly can't, you can't trade on margin really.
Yep.
Did you always get, when I've done that and it's backfired, it's because I didn't tell the CFO or the CEO before I went out and, changed the profile of a deal for a specific period of time. Did you ever sort of ask for forgiveness, not permission? And, they come in, they're like, we were expecting $200,000 in implementation fees. Where'd they go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing that I really enjoyed at Patient Pop was autonomy. So I think Luke, our CEO, and then Jason Gardner, our CFO, they really trusted me to make good decisions. So I wasn't out here acting like it was the Wild West. Like, first of all, I would look like how much implementation fees are, how, in dollars have we collected this quarter? Like, how are we trending? Are we going to miss by a lot, or are we way ahead? Like, if we're way ahead, it's a much easier call. But typically, like, I was really good about working cross-functionally to make decisions. So if I was going to say, hey, we're going to eliminate the implementation fee off, 100 customers, that was usually like a quick meeting with Luke, Jason, and Carla, who ran CS. And I would say like, hey, here's why I'm doing it. Here's how it's going to impact our collections for this year, but here's how it's going to impact bookings and then downstream, live recurring revenue. We just get agreement as a team, and then we'd execute on it. Like, for us, we're a growth company, and we wanted to make sure that we got our product into the hands of as many doctors as possible, because it was an awesome product and it works really well and they stick around. So usually just working cross-functionally very quickly, but also like a high level of trust from my CEO made it pretty easy.
That's great. And, you're to your point about the directors and working cross-functionally, these are things that are not always obvious, particularly if you've got like a very strong supportive boss, which is, if you've got a strong supportive boss within one specific siloed function like sales, you may be used to just executing and not needing to get so much buy-in. And one of the things that people run into, at least I ran into, was how to build influence and how to get people aligned with you when they don't work directly for you. And obviously part of that is just proactive communication, and not just telling them why you're going to do what you want to do, but also taking in their feedback and telling them why it's going to be helpful. So I think you're articulating some really, really good lessons. You've talked about how, a culture of winning, that one of the things that you really believe strongly in, that you've been successful at Patient Pop, and probably that you're helping your clients with, is building a culture of winners. So what does that mean to you, and how do you do that?
Yeah, wow. There's a lot of things that go into building a culture of winners. I think, so let me say this before I go into it. If you look back at ZocDoc and Patient Pop, what you see is Kool-Aid drinkers, and that's awesome. Like I was one, right? Like I loved working at both of those businesses, and I loved the product and the people. So I think most of building a culture of winners comes down to a few things. It comes down to setting expectations during the interview process, which I think a lot of companies don't do. I think a lot of companies hire a lot of people, they bring them into their sales organization. The salesperson sits down for the first day at work and they're like, whoa, this is way, way, way different than I was sold, right? At Patient Pop and at ZocDoc, we very, very much evangelized what it was like to work there. So you knew about it in the interview process, you knew about it during training, and you knew about it when you hit the floor. So we had people who had already said, yes, I want to work in a high growth, fast paced, really intense work environment. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. So we did a good job of setting those expectations and then weeding out folks who just weren't going to be a good fit. That was sort of step number one. Step number two for me was like showing your team that you care. And I think there's so much false caring, like, hey, put a check mark in my calendar to like go out and say something nice to one of my reps or send an email. Like for me and my leadership team, like we truly and personally celebrated wins. Like we were proud when people succeeded. There were tears and laughter, like in the office, like it was a family. And I know that's super cliche, but we did that through celebration and creating this really strong bond. But we also did it through allowing people to invest in themselves with company dollars. So one thing that I think is really important is giving people some money every month or every quarter and saying, hey, what do you want to get better at? Like as a human being, as a person, and it doesn't even have to be related here. We think that better people make better employees. So here's $500. Go grab a course, go buy a book, go take this workshop. Like those were things we were always doing at both ZocDoc and Patient Pop. And it really became this tight-knit group of people that were like, hey, this company loves me and they have my back and I'm here through thick and thin. So I know that's sort of a long-winded way of saying invest in your employees, but to me, it was just the most important and most crucial.
What's your view on quota? And there's, a couple different schools of thought. One of them is you want a culture of winning, particularly at an early stage. So you set low targets, where your expectation is the team is going to deliver 115% of their goal, but everybody's going to be high-fiving and feeling like, they succeeded and they crushed it. There's another world where it's just, the quota is mainly an input into the revenue model. And, we're going to add everything up and we're going to assume, 80%, we're going to set quota difficult, but, somewhat attainable. Again, 70 to 80% should achieve it, maybe 65%. A couple people are going to smash it. A couple people are going to not come anywhere close. Those are more difficult environments, but maybe they pull people or they stretch their focus. Which do you prefer?
The latter. Like to me, I don't know, man. I don't. Let me use a sports analogy, right? Like I want to win the national championship. I don't want to win like the Goodyear Tire Bowl, right? So like to me, it's like being
This is because you went to Ohio State. Be quiet. It's enough. Let's talk about the Ohio State baseball team.
Right. Basketball should be number one. But no, like my thought is, man, we create an environment where like when you hit quota, you're proud of yourself. Like you are excited and you truly have pride. And I think like if quota is easy and everyone's hitting quota, like, I mean, cool, I guess. But to me, it's like it doesn't become that special. I want it to be special. And I want top performers to be, on the last day of the month, if they're short, I want it to mean something to them to get the extra 2%. I want them to sit down and think and say, how am I going to nail this last 2% in the last 3 hours of the day? And so I think the latter builds that culture where if I look around and nearly everyone's hitting quota, like, I don't know. I don't personally like that environment because I haven't come from either of those. ZocDoc's quota was nearly impossible, but the best people hit it regularly, and Patient Pop's, while easier, was still very challenging.
Well, I appreciate your opinion.
Yep.
And it's nice to hear somebody with a strong point of view. So, Justin, it's been awesome having you on the show. We are coming to the end of our time together. And this is the part where we like to inspire people, and particularly because you've sort of constantly emphasized you need to reinvest in yourself. You need to be reading, you need to be learning. So who are, it can be books, it can be movies, it can be podcasts, or it can be bosses. But give us some inspiration. Give us some places that we can go if we want to improve ourselves. What are some books that we should read? Who are some people we should look up to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, for books, I love Atomic Habits by James Clear. One of my favorite books that I've read in the past probably couple of years for just building incrementally better habits. I also like going back and revisiting some really sort of fundamental books around growth. And it's not necessarily, I don't want to call it fundamental, but it's an older book, which is The Sales Acceleration Formula by Mark Roberge. Every time I revisit that book, I pull another nugget out of it. I love reading The SaaS Sales Method by Jaco van der Kuij. If you really want to understand how businesses work, how the unit economics make sense, and really how to build a data-driven sales team, I love his books. For me, I love following people on Twitter. So, I love Austin Allred over at Lambda School. I love Jason Kalkanis, regardless of what you think of him. I think he's really motivating, inspiring. I love Jason Lemkin. Those are some folks. And then in terms of investing, I love really taking courses. I know this sounds, kind of strange, but I want to become a better digital marketer. I don't really have a marketing background. So I'm in the Digital Marketing Institute taking their course right now. Those are things that I think about when I think about investing in yourself, is spending money, spending time, and spending energy to get really good at what you currently do, or to get better at something that you've never done before. And those are some examples.
Awesome. One quick question before we go. Atomic Habits, give us the spark notes, the cliff notes. What are some of the key insights? Because it just sounds like a great book.
Yeah, I think the biggest key insight is that people try and build habits all the time without understanding that there's incremental improvements to your habits. So for instance, you might get up one day and say, I want to run a marathon, right? But that's really hard. So most people will never accomplish that goal. And he just walks you through sort of a goal setting technique where each little tiny goal builds incrementally upon itself. So maybe the first day where you're training for your marathon, you literally get up and you put your running shoes on and you tie them and you can go back to bed. That's step one. Next day, it's you're putting your running shoes on and you're walking to your door, and then you sit down on the couch, you're done. Step two. And he's just building up and up and up because, he really believes that habits build upon themselves. And then he also uses habit anchoring, where it's if I want to make sure I do something every day, tether it to something else. So if I want to make sure that I enter something in my iPhone every day, then put my iPhone next to my coffee and say out loud, when I pour my coffee, I'm going to do X. And then every day when you pour your coffee, you'll know that you also do this one thing. And so doing a lot of habit tethering, which I think is really interesting. That's my really shitty review of the book. Please get it and actually read it, because he's a lot smarter than I am and will do a better job of walking you through it.
I didn't think it was that shitty. I thought that was great. Thank you. If folks are listening, maybe they want to hire you, maybe they want to just connect with you, what are your preferred mechanisms? Do you want them to subscribe to your newsletter? Tell us how you want us to get in touch with you when we listen to this podcast.
Sure. A couple different ways. You can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Justin Welsh, WELSH. You can go to my website, which is just theofficialjustin.com. And one other place you can check out is, people follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to give back to the LinkedIn community by doing workshops and building courses and things like that. So you can check out the LinkedInplaybook.com, which is something I just put up this week to help people, build their thought leadership profiles and their career growth on LinkedIn. So those are the easiest ways. And if you need to email me, it's just hello@theofficialjustin.com.
The LinkedInplaybook.com. Great URL. Well done, sir.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being on the show. We're going to talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals. But Justin, thanks for being with us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam.
Hey, folks, it's Sam's Corner. Love that conversation with Justin. Just a lot of really, really great insights. A couple things to take away from it. The first of them is, his first couple jobs, he called himself a failure. That was 6 years of his career. And it took a while for something to click, for him to find his passion. And one of those things is just being around inspiring and smart people. And I think sometimes people I think the word passion can be really confusing, because it's still work. Some days are going to suck. Not every day is going to be super exciting, particularly when you're in an entry-level role. If you're an SDR, an account executive, there are going to be days that are not awesome. And the way that you feel inspired often has to do with the types of people that are sitting around you and whether or not they are inspiring to you and whether or not they are demonstrating good habits and good behaviors. So think about that when you're quote unquote looking for your passion. Look around you at the people you're surrounding yourself with and figure out if those people are inspiring you at work. Also, figure out if you believe in the product you're selling. Some people just have trouble because they do not believe in the product they're selling. Justin was a huge believer in ZocDoc, a huge believer in what he was doing at Patient Pop, and that helps. That helps a lot. The other thing that he talked about is just this understanding and awareness when you're in a high growth business that everything breaks all the time. Everything is flawed. Everything is imperfect. This is true. This is true anytime you're seeking to change. Anytime there are large groups of people, my libertarian friends are often talking about how, government is inherently flawed, government's corrupt, government is inefficient and inept. And, my point is always large groups of people are inefficient and inept all the time. If you've ever seen people at big companies, you know that there's every groups of humans fuck things up. So that's okay. That's not necessarily indicator of positive or negative. It's not necessarily an indicator of success. You have to understand when you join a startup, the startup is trying to change things. And to change things, you have to you have to go in and do things differently. And some of the things that you're going to do differently are not going to work. And sometimes as you seek to grow, there are going to be all of these imperfect processes that you develop that don't ultimately scale. Those are actually indications of success, not necessarily indications of failure. So don't freak out if it feels like it's the inmates are running the asylum when you join an early stage company. That's the whole point. The whole point is that you're there to help shape, mold, and modify and help the company grow. And oftentimes the chaos is a sign that things are working and that you are discovering something important. And as a consequence, you're going to need to modify and append and a change. If nothing ever changed, the business would be static and wouldn't be growing. So again, the chaos, the imperfection, the bad communication styles, all of those things are not necessarily bad or good. And oftentimes they are good because they are indicators that something powerful is happening. I guess the final thing I'll say is just, focusing on, there's all this conversation and all this talk about, work-life balance and work intensity. And, a lot of people that, some of whom have never actually had an operating job are lecturing all of us about like what they see as their investors, what they see of winning companies. And it always is about hard work. And that's true. And there is an element of life and of hard work that is hard because it sucks, because it's not something that you want to do. But you don't have to feel like shit. I don't think feeling like shit is indicative that you're doing something special or hard. Most of the time when people are doing something hard that is uncomfortable and difficult over time, there's a reason. And the reason is because A, they feel empowered, they've been given responsibility, so they feel ownership over that hard thing, and their mind is engaged with solving it. So the second thing is, the long-term goal. When you're training for a marathon, and I've run a couple of marathons, it's not about, I don't want to wake up every single day. And on the program that I do, the Hal Higdon program, by the way, if you're out there, you run 5 to 6 days a week. So that's not always fun. Some days you wake up at 6 a.m. and you got to go do a 4 or 5 mile maintenance run, and it sucks. But what's keeping you there? What's keeping you in it? First of all, some part of you grows to love it. And the second part of you is understanding that you're training for an ultimate destination, for a goal. And this is an input into that goal. If I was just doing it with no end in sight, if I felt like a hamster on a wheel, and Justin also mentioned this loss of control, if I felt like I didn't know why and that there weren't results or outputs tied to my effort, then that would start to suck and feel like shit. So it's not just about hard work. Hard work doesn't mean berate people. Hard work doesn't mean be an asshole. Hard work shouldn't be lectured to us by people that take all of August off. If you're out there in the venture capital community, no offense, you don't really know about that. Meeting founders all day is not necessarily hard work. The people that are doing the hard work are the salespeople and the marketing people and the people that are in there in the guts of the business every day building. And if you're out there doing that, the thing that will help you get along is some empowerment, some ability to control your environment and a connection to a long-term goal. So that's a little bit of my rant. It is December 31st. I hope you're going to do something safe and fun for New Year's. It's the last night of the 10s, and we're heading into the 20s. So this is the last night of the decade that you're listening to this, and we're looking out ahead to 2020. I hope you have an incredible 2020. I hope it's been a great year for you. 2019 has been an incredible year for Revenue Collective. We've grown to over 1,000 members. Our associate program is building. We're thinking about launching an SDR program, and our executive community is robust and thriving. So I'm grateful, humble, and thankful. And I hope you're out there too, having a great one. And if you didn't, that's okay. This too shall pass. And hopefully you've set some goals and are excited about what's to come in 2020. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for supporting the Sales Hacker podcast. Thanks to our sponsors. The first is, of course, DocuSign. Take control with the DocuSign Agreement Cloud. Go check out more at go.docusign.com/saleshacker. And also thanks to Outreach, who's been an ongoing and continued supporter of both this podcast, Revenue Collective, and also the sales engagement community writ large. They are the leading sales engagement platform. If you want to reach out to me, you can. LinkedIn.com/the word in/Sam F. Jacobs. And I will see you in the next decade.